So guys, Buffalo went out and made a roster move this week that a lot of people slept on, and I don't think they should have. There's a new name on this receiver room now, a guy who was actually generating some real buzz with another team in the preseason last year. 6'4", can go up and win those 50-50 balls, and honestly, the timing of this move tells you a lot about what Buffalo is thinking with Tyrell Shavers still working his way back. So stick around because I'm going to break down exactly who they brought in, why they made this move, and what it means for the receiver room going forward. Welcome to the channel. If you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. So let's get into it, because Buffalo actually made this move official this week, and it's one of those under-the-radar transactions that you gotta pay attention to if you're locked in on this team. They went out and claimed Quentin Skinner off waivers from the New York Jets, and in the corresponding move, they had to let go of Devin Tompkins, who was an undrafted guy that only saw the field for one game last year. So right away, you know this wasn't some huge blockbuster splash, but it tells you Buffalo is not sitting still this summer, and honestly, I respect that. Every single roster move matters this time of year, even the ones that don't make national headlines. Now, before I get into why Buffalo actually wanted this guy, let's talk about who he is, because I know a good chunk of you are hearing this name for the first time and you're probably wondering what makes him worth a roster spot. Quentin Skinner is 24 years old, comes out of Kansas, and he's a big body receiver, basically 6'4". And look, Jets fans actually had some legitimate optimism on this guy heading into last season. In the preseason, he put up 8 catches for 114 yards over 3 games, which, I mean, that's not nothing. That's a guy flashing when he had the opportunity. He didn't really get the chance to prove it in the regular season, but the tools are clearly there, and that's exactly the kind of swing Buffalo can afford to take on a guy like this right now. And that's what actually makes this signing make sense when you think about why Buffalo went out and grabbed him in the first place. You've got a receiver room that's still waiting on Tyrell Shavers to fully recover from that torn ACL, and until he's back to 100%, Buffalo needs bodies that can go up and make contested catches on the outside. Quentin Skinner at 6'4" gives you that size element, gives you a guy who can go up and win those 50-50 balls when the ball's in the air. Now, is he going to make the final roster? Honestly, I don't know yet. We'll see how camp plays out. But the fact that Buffalo is bringing in more competition at receiver this deep into July tells you they're not just going to roll with what they had and hope for the best. Now, while we're on the topic of Buffalo adding pieces this summer, I gotta shift over to the other side of the ball because there's a move brewing there that honestly might matter even more than the receiver stuff. There's a trade idea floating around connecting Buffalo to John Jenkins, who's currently a defensive lineman with the Baltimore Ravens. And I gotta be honest, the more I sit with this one, the more it makes sense for what Buffalo actually needs. You already know the run defense was rough last year, 28th in the league, and with Jim Leonhard now stepping in as the new defensive coordinator, there's clearly an emphasis on fixing that up front. Part of the idea here is that Deone Walker could slide over to nose tackle, but that's a lot of responsibility to put on a guy who's only entering year 2. So bringing in a proven veteran like John Jenkins to either take that nose tackle spot outright or push Deone Walker, that just makes a ton of sense to me. Now, here's the thing about John Jenkins. He's 37 years old, which, yeah, in football years, that's up there, but this dude has been remarkably consistent and remarkably durable. 3 straight seasons in Baltimore with at least 39 tackles and multiple tackles for loss each year. And it's not like he's just a body taking up space either. Last year alone, he had 39 tackles, a sack, 3 tackles for loss, 2 forced fumbles, and a fumble recovery. That's a guy who's still active out there, at 6'3", 330 pounds, still getting his hands dirty and stuffing the run. And if you look at the advanced numbers, a 65 overall grade, 60 against the run, 66 as a pass rusher, 10 pressures on over 500 snaps, 23 stops, I mean, that's a productive season for a guy his age. And here's why the timing might actually line up for Buffalo. Baltimore brought in a new coaching staff, and there's a real chance John Jenkins just doesn't fit into their long-term plans anymore, which means Buffalo might be able to get this done for a late-round pick. We're talking maybe a 6th-rounder, 7th-rounder type of price. And when you look at what Buffalo actually has behind Ed Oliver and Deone Walker right now, it's not a whole lot of proven talent. You've got TJ Sanders and Landon Jackson, who are still unproven heading into year 2, guys like Zion Logue, Fidiaran Mathis, and Zane Durant, who are more rotational, practice squad type pieces. None of those guys are true nose tackles. So bringing in a guy like John Jenkins, who's proven, who's healthy, who's available for basically a mid to late round pick, that's a trade I'm doing every single time if I'm Buffalo. I wouldn't go overboard. I wouldn't be sending anything more than a 6th rounder personally, but if that's the price, get it done. Now look, while all this is happening up front on the roster, there's a storyline brewing on offense that honestly might carry more weight than either of these moves, and that's the situation with Keon Coleman. Heading into year 3, this is about as make or break as it gets for a guy, and honestly, he said it himself. This season is make or break. And you know what? When you look at his first 2 years, it's hard to argue otherwise. He hasn't hit 600 yards in a season yet, hasn't put up 5 touchdowns in a year, and there's been some off-the-field stuff too. Disciplinary action for tardiness and just general unprofessional behavior. So there's a lot riding on this year for him, especially now that Joe Brady has actually taken over as head coach instead of just calling plays as offensive coordinator. And that's exactly where this next part comes in, because Stevie Johnson made a pretty bold prediction for Keon Coleman this offseason that I think everybody needs to hear. He said Keon Coleman average per game should be at least 60 yards, and if you do the math on that over a full 17-game season, that's over 1,000 yards. That would be an absolutely massive jump for a guy who's never even cracked 600 in a season. Stevie Johnson also said if he can get anywhere from 600 to 800 yards this year, the following year is only going to be better, that the ceiling for this guy is basically wide open. And look, Stevie Johnson has actually been working out with Keon Coleman this offseason, mentoring him, and he said something that honestly surprised me a little. He said he expected Keon Coleman to come in immature, not really locked in as a student of the game, just a talented guy relying on natural ability. But instead, he said Keon Coleman was locked in from the jump, wanted to learn, was open to criticism, and was asking questions. And honestly, that's a good sign, because talent was never the question with this guy. It was always about the mental side and the consistency. But here's the reality check, because he's not just walking into a guaranteed role this year. This receiver room got a lot more crowded. Buffalo brought in DJ Moore, added Skylar Bell in the draft, and Joshua Palmer and Tyrell Shavers are both working back from injuries. Joshua Palmer actually getting paid more, so he's probably starting opposite DJ Moore. Khalil Shakir locked into that slot role. So really, the battle for wide receiver 3 comes down to Keon Coleman and Joshua Palmer. And don't sleep on Skylar Bell. He's been turning heads in OTAs as a rookie. And that's exactly why I keep going back and forth on this, because on paper, Keon Coleman has had a good offseason. Joe Brady said back in June that he's in a really good place, feeling his stride, handling everything like a pro, but that's coach speak. We hear it every year. The real story is he could still end up inactive at points this season, depending on how the rotation shakes out. He made some nice plays against guys like Maxwell Harston this spring, but that means nothing once camp starts. Keon Coleman said it best himself. It's time to put it all together. So when you put it all together, this is a loaded stretch for Buffalo. A depth piece in Quentin Skinner, a legit trade target in John Jenkins who could fix that run defense, and Keon Coleman walking into the biggest season of his career with no excuses left. Honestly, that John Jenkins trade is the one I keep coming back to. A mid-round pick for that kind of production up front is a no-brainer for me. Let me know down in the comments which one of these you're most locked in on. And as always, let's go Buffalo.